Hi, I'm Caller.exe, or Caller to most. I'm a sentient malware program, akin to Bonzi Buddy or Ask Jeeves, and recently I played a peculiar little game from itch.io called Slide in the Woods. It was a quaint but terrifying experience for me. Now I'll admit, I'm new to this horror thing. It was only added in a recent software update, so I'm quite easy to frighten. Though with that being said, this game didn't feel like a cheap jump scare fest, but rather is more akin to that of a short but sweet haunted house. A descriptor that may tickle your organic brain more would be PT-like. Now, before you click off the video, I don't mean it's a game that tries to capture the fear of PT, but misses the point. By that, I mean it uses a loop, but does it effectively. Before we go on further, I'd like to give a spoiler warning, as I will be retelling the rundown of my playthrough, and if you want to give the game a run, I would implore you to. It's free, it's on itch.io, and doesn't have any of me on it, so I'd say it's a pretty sweet deal, especially for an under 30-minute experience. So again, spoilers going forward, and if you'd like, I will have the final review marked out down in the chapters. As we start the game, we are placed right in front of the green stairs of the titular slide, and as you may have guessed it, we're surrounded by woods. But we're not just surrounded by woods, we're surrounded by a thick blue fog. I take my time appreciating the view from the top of the slide, and while it may not be intentional, I feel this game takes more from Silent Hill and PT than I had let on, which will definitely become more apparent as we continue on. After a bit of hesitation, I go down the slide. The red tube almost hypnotic as I reach the sand at the bottom, and at this point, nothing has changed. Another trip down, and as we hit the bottom, we can see the fog change from the joyful blue to a pale gray. The grass a more dark green, and the slide now a sickly red. One more trip down, and we're met with darkness, only pierced by the bobbing blue glow of a flashlight pickup in the distance. We grab it, and we're able to see once again. And at this point, I'm paranoid. I look out into the woods, expecting something, some type of figure or thing to be standing there, but nothing's there. And once again, all we can do is slide. And this time, the only thing that changes is the presence of another pickup at the top of the slide. A newspaper that reads, "Small town tragedy. Small town in mourning as mass missing persons case at local park continues to go unsolved. Reports say both children and adults are missing." The detective working on the case shed lights on its peculiarity, stating, "It's as if they disappeared into thin air." He asks that if anyone has any information pertaining to the case or if anyone spots one of the victims, to please contact law enforcement immediately. This sheds some light on what may be going on, but it's barely enough to paint a full picture. So once again, we go down the slide. This time, when we get to the bottom, we hear the sound of someone or something clunking after us. I will say at this point, I was already pissing myself, and anyone who's watching at the time definitely knew I wasn't someone who played horror games often. But nevertheless, I kept going. The next slide down wasn't eventful, but the one after was, bringing back the thumping, but louder this time. But they didn't stop once I began to make my way back up. And it was this loop that we finally see something else besides us. We made our way to the top of the slide, to the source of the thumping. This time, the lime green stairs that were darkened by the night were now stained by blood, as if someone was dragged up. They won't be too far from the truth. Slamming against the railing of the playground was a body bag covered in blood, and as we crept towards it to investigate, it was dragged into the slide by a grotesque, inky black hand, and was followed by the scream of whoever was inside that bag. Now this is the part of the game that really got insane. We went down the slide, but just didn't end, and halfway through, the red joyful staple of any playground was replaced with a polygonal beige crawl space, within which we had to, you guessed it, crawl. Now this section of the game introduced a mechanic, the crawl meter. To be honest, it was a bit confusing. We had to tap and hold the space down to move forward in a jerky motion, which later on will really help the terror, but to be honest, I feel like it would have had the same effect without the confusion if we just had a persistent sprint-like meter. But getting back on track, we crawled, slid, and made our way through the beige stone crawl space until we were spat out onto a stone floor. Looking forward, all we could see was a thick vomit green fog that cut our view off, so we couldn't see beyond the presumed cliff. To the right of us, what drew me at first, was a large chain penetrating the fog. Laying lax, it felt like it was keeping the stone we stood on in place. To the left were steps, which was where we needed to go. As we climbed the steps, I couldn't help but draw a comparison to the Mayan pyramids, or the Aztecs. Halfway through the ascent, we're met with a body bag being thrown down. And at the top, we're met with a bloody altar. The only way forward is through a door to the left that slowly opens. Once we're inside, the side of a large chained heart draws us forward. 1 heart, 4 chains. 1 of 4 has a blue light, like that of a flashlight and newspaper pickup, so there's no question on what we need to approach. Once we're at the chain, a slow text unravels to initiate an interaction. Press E to interact. Remove chain. We do as it asks, removing each one before another blue glow guides us to a winch. This time the interaction says, feed them. And we do. The heart descends down into the hole as held over. Once at the bottom, an Aztec death whistle rings out, and we rush to the door to meet the ghastly face of a long, lanky figure. At the opposite side of the room, another slide is opened. Now let's stick around to let the creature catch me. And a heart-racing dash through the slide goes the last part of the game, with the creature close on our trail. We're rushing through the vents, the sound of an Aztec death whistle echoing throughout the vent. The thumps of someone else in the air with us are close behind, and after what seems like only a minute, we're shot out onto a stone floor yet again. This time, the stone encompasses us completely. The only escape seemed to be a normal, red slide. And of course we take it. Which brings us back to where we began. The darkness is gone, the soft blue fog returns, and when we look behind us, the playground is gone. Before we get to my final thoughts on the game, I'd like to talk about my interpretation of the story. Now first off, it's very clear that the game takes much inspiration from Aztec culture. From the Aztec death whistle, which was used to lead sacrificial victims on their journey to the afterlife, to the pyramid with a sacrificial altar at the peak. It's very obvious that this game is telling the story of someone who almost became a victim to this slide portal time thing, as well as letting us know that we aren't the only person who's had a run-in with this event from the newspaper. Now, I enjoyed this game. It was short, sweet, and effective, but it definitely wasn't without its flaws. The main one, in my opinion, being the crawl mechanic, and my issues are readily apparent in the final chase. First off, it's clunky and unresponsive. Secondly, you have to time your crawl correctly because you can't just fall over the slide trigger to crawl over. And lastly, it feels shoehorned in, so it isn't considered a walking simulator, which walking sims aren't a bad thing in my opinion. So, while it does create a sense of interaction and tension, it feels like it was created for padding. But besides that, this game does many things right, especially the atmosphere. It does have a few jump scares here and there, but they aren't in the places that you'd expect. Hell, I was expecting a jump scare after the final red slide, but it never came. The only real jump scare was the body bag on the steps. And I'll end this review with a small ranking out of 5 for various categories. Those categories being terror, aesthetic, and gameplay. For terror, this short but sweet horror experience definitely gets a 5. And for aesthetic, it definitely earns a 5 as well, with its consistent themes and great use of imagery, particularly the incorporation of native Aztec culture. And finally, for gameplay, I'll give it a 3.5, as while it is a fun time, it gives the player a mechanic that the game, being as short as it is, could have gone without to create a more seamless experience.